Tom, do you have any recommendations or suggestions around the difference between people writing their own book or hiring a ghostwriter? I know some very successful people where they literally just pay a service to interview them. What do you tell people?
You got to get a good ghostwriter. There's nothing wrong with using a ghostwriter. It's more like, what's the quality you're actually going to get? And are you a better writer than that person? And are they going to write in your voice? Tried to have something ghostwritten for me, and I was like, this just doesn't sound like me. I can't do it. But here's another hack. If you can get an ambassador group, which is one of the things I was going to say you should do, people who are like raising their hands, like 50 to 100 people who say, yeah, I will read the book and review it. Don't give them the link to the book. Tell them to go to Amazon and search the book title and find it. But I get them to commit to downloading the book and leaving a review. And so now Amazon sees that and they actually will start to rank you higher.
Good morning, marketers. Today we're back and we are talking about the marketing behind self-publishing. Tom Morks has had a business here for a couple of years now that all of us had no idea he was doing and very successful at, just helping authors self-publish and sell their book. So when we found this out, we wanted to kind of find out more about it. I'm currently working with a client who is working on self-publishing her book, and I've been going through and creating a marketing strategy for her. And I told her up front, I've never done this before. I don't know. I shouldn't say I don't know, but I've never had a lot of experience or actually executed on helping someone becoming a best-selling author. We should say an Amazon best-selling author, and just sort of the monetization behind the book and the book world. So I got a lot of questions. I'm very curious about this. Let's get into it. All right, Tom, why don't you kick us off and tell us a bit about business you're running and what have you been doing? I don't know if you could share your numbers that you share with me.
Yeah, so I've been self-publishing since 2012. And from that time, I have published a number of books myself. And that was the number one thing back then when I started in 2012, 13 was how do I actually get people to buy these books and read them? And how do I make money from them? Kind of started at scratch from zero, book number 1, book 2, book 3. By book 3, maybe made $1,000 off it. By book 4, maybe 15,000. And then it started to kind of grow from there. And I figured out essentially a system for marketing and selling my books. And then that led me to marketing and selling other people's books. They kind of reached out to me. So I started a publishing company and then we started a book marketing company. And now it's almost like one of those things. I never thought I'd be in this space for that long. I just thought I'd go to something else, but it's just really interesting that the demand is still there. It's kind of like it's got me now. And I just work with a lot of authors and we work with a lot of self-publishers and help them market and sell their books fundamentally.
So you said you made like a few $1,000s from the book, but that doesn't sound great.
No, I mean, from my early books, yeah. I mean, the first book I rolled out $0. The second book I made maybe a few $100 initially.
My understanding of like when you create a book, like it would be great to have like great book sales, but that usually you're leveraging that for, in other ways.
Yeah.
As you answer that question, can we also define fiction, nonfiction? Is it a book to generate leads? Is you meant to do you get rich off sales of the book? Like what is the strategy here?
I distinguish between myself and then kind of what we do for authors too. So my stuff is all nonfiction. And really it was just at that time, 2012, 13, I was like, how do I make money online? It was like, that was my mindset, right? It's like, what can I do? It's like, people doing like TikTok now, YouTube, whatever it is. At the time, I was like, I can write decently well. I think I can figure out that game. And so that's where I went to. So for me, I was trying to make money off those books. And so when I rolled them out, it was just like, it was to my own audience, but I was also list building at the time. I was like, I want to build my list. I want to do the whole blogging thing, Yarrow, like you were an expert at. I was like, that seemed to me like the key. I was like, I'll use my books, hopefully make money from the books. That'll be my first initial products and we'll see where this goes. That's the thing. It's super interesting. We can kind of go wherever you want to go with this, by the way. But, I think about that compared to something like courses or other types of products that you can definitely in the nonfiction space make more money on, at least in certain contexts. But the interesting thing about books is once you get it going, once you get the machine running, it can generate kind of sales in perpetuity. And by getting things on Amazon, you do tap into an audience of people that you wouldn't get, say, from like SEO and stuff like that. You can start to accrue an audience from that too. So yeah, my books started out pretty low, but no, some of them have made, 20, 30,000 just on their own. And so again, it's not, you're not going to retire off that. I don't actually know where my numbers are. I don't really look at them anymore. But all of a sudden you start adding you have a library of books and they're all making money. So I'll get checks every week for my books, $50, $100 here and there. And then all of a sudden that kind of starts to accrue. And strategically on the nonfiction ones, it was books like Collaborate back there. And I was able to use that to fill consulting gigs and coaching gigs and service related gigs, like for product launches and things like that. I never wanted to be like exclusively books, but now we work with some authors that are exclusively books. It's like, how do we just make the books themselves the the rainmaker effectively versus leading them through a funnel to sell courses and coaching and things like that.
You mean like people will actually write a book to make money from the book sales?
Yeah, lots of people.
I heard that the guy who wrote The Art of Not Giving a Beep,
Mark Manson.
Mark Manson, like I heard he sold like, I forget how many millions, over 10 million or whatever it was. Like, or sorry, I think he had made over $10 million in book sales alone. They translated in all these different languages and so on. That's why you see so many books now have F-bomb in it. And I thought that was fascinating because I always thought that authors, especially when they go through traditional publishers, they don't make a lot of money from the actual book sales, but they get paid as speakers. A lot of authors are now doing courses, or they launch the book and then they launch like a podcast or a YouTube channel. You saw Brene Brown, she got like a Netflix special. I've heard about people doing like the whole Kindle publishing thing, right? Where you kind of just get something ghostwritten.
Going back to the earlier days, were you writing primarily around topics that you were interested in and already an expert in?
Yeah.
So you were, because there's like two schools of thought here. Writing books that you've already predetermined will generate some revenue for you because it's a sought after subject. It's trendy. It's whatever, right? Versus writing something you're nodding your head. It sounds like that's what you're writing. Now, transitioning to today, how do you recommend someone, one of your clients, people that you're working with, how do you advise them on, listen, are you writing these books and self-publishing these books to generate revenue? Well, then these are the subjects you should be writing about and we can coach you on that. Like, how do you walk someone through that process?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I would say my story, I wrote things that I was interested in writing. Like I was really captivated by Seth Godin and like Stephen Pressfield at the time. So The War of Art, if anybody's ever read it. And again, coming out of the army, I was like, I have no talents. I got nothing. I got no skill set, but you know, I got the military experience and I can kind of write. And I wish there was just more writing like The War of Art almost. So it was like, that's kind of where I got my start. It was just, then it was like, here's the next book, which was like where people were asking me questions about things, but not necessarily me as a subject matter expert. And then even I went in for my first several books was just like, I looked at it like I was doing almost like a PhD thesis or something on it. Like I'm not an expert, but I'm going to go interview all the people. I'm going to go curate and collate all the sources and then put it into a coherent package. That's what the complete guide to pay what you want pricing was. I wouldn't consider myself like a master at it, but I did it. I tested it. And then I interviewed a bunch of people and I ran a bunch of experiments and got other information from other people. And then I packaged it and sold it. That was like actually my first viral product. And it wasn't because I was an expert, but I did have an intuitive sense of where there was an opening in the market because I'd seen some people write about this. I'd heard a podcast interview with Pat Flynn and the Hybrid Athlete guys, awesome dudes. I interviewed them for the book too. They were talking about how they were doing like $300 a day using pay what you want, selling like fitness. I was like, light bulb. And then I just went out to all the places that were like connected to Pat Flynn and whatnot. Got all these, like I started doing guest posts. I started building up this whole audience around it. Got like a viral article on Medium at the time when that still used to happen. And all of that was actually something that helped me kind of get started. Now though, if I was doing it from scratch, I would say, yeah, there's no way you're going to get me from scratch, write something just because I'm interested in a topic if there's not a financial benefit to it. And so coming back to the predominant question here of who's listening to this is like, do I write to market or not? Fundamentally, that's the question. And I'd say for fiction, that's especially necessary. I'd say for nonfiction, if you're a subject matter expert in something, it's like, what is the goal of it? Is it to sell your book or is it to sell coaching or consulting or whatever? Like if Yarrow comes out with a book on remote work and organization and systems and stuff like that and feeds right into Inbox Done, it doesn't matter if that's a bestseller. You know, it can be a perennial seller. It can be a 6 or 7 figure earner for the core business that he's running. So anytime I'm working with nonfiction, that's usually the context. It's not that we're trying to sell a ton of books there unless they're trying to hit the New York Times or Wall Street Journal or whatever bestseller list. Like when I worked with Neil Patel, like the objective was hit the New York Times bestseller list. But he wanted that so that it would feed into his marketing agency. It didn't matter to him that he was making any profit on that book.
Yeah, I was going to ask on continuing the Neil Patel, was he spending millions of dollars to just get that bestseller badge so then obviously could, you know, get higher quality caliber clients for the agency? Because that's obviously a net negative with the book, potentially a net positive with your behind the scenes business, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, that's possible. If you put enough money behind something, you could get a bestseller without profit on it.
Yeah, definitely. The whole system is absolutely gameable. And I will say that it probably takes $250,000 to hit one of those lists. And I don't want to say that we gamed the system or anything like that. I think, you know, a lot of it was organic sales. He talked about this, so it's not like I'm exposing anything here. So I'll just share what I can share. So he was doing a lot of speaking engagements anyway. Everybody knows Neil anyway. So he had a huge audience to source from, number one. That was critical. He also had 2 co-authors. So the book was called Hustle. And so again, it's not actually related. It wasn't even related to his marketing agency. But now he gets to put New York Times bestselling author on his profile. And to him, he was telling me that that is important to him. Like that was substantial to him. Just even having that little description next to your name, which I think is very interesting.
I've noticed that, yeah. I never really focused on trying to get like third-party credentials and awards and stuff like that. But lately, with working with clients that have it, I realized how much they leverage that.
It does. It's crazy. It's wild that it works too, because once you know how to get there, you're like, why is this so meaningful to people? But it is what it is.
And that brings me to the first thing I kind of want to dive into, because I'm very curious what your thoughts are on this, Tom. Now with AI, ChatGPT, like I'm sure everyone, like you could write a book so much easier and faster. And I feel like it's going to happen where we have this influx of people who are authors. And I'm curious, have you dived into this? Do you know, in terms of like copyright or legalities, like does it really matter? I don't think it's going to matter because you edit it, like you use ChatGPT to write some stuff, but you have to edit it quite a bit, right? But now like I feel like we could write so much faster. Like I know there was these services. I don't know if this is kind of what you're doing, but remember there was like Book in a Box where you would pay them like 25 grand. They would write your book for you and then they would help you do all the stuff. And then you pay them another 25 grand to like market it for you. Now you could do all of that with AI. So what is your thoughts there? Do you think that there's going to be this huge insurgence of like people now, it's so easy to write a book that it might not matter or not be as great or as cool in a few years, right? What are your thoughts around AI in the book publishing space or book writing space?
Yeah. Have you guys used ChatGPT on writing articles and stuff like that?
It requires a lot of editing.
Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of where I'm at with it personally. I'm like, this requires a tremendous amount of editing, but I think it's a great way to get an outline. And it's a great way to kind of just put first words on paper. Like I'm a faster editor than I am writer.
Yeah.
So yeah, anything that can kind of, if somebody can get me a rough draft of something, I'm much better taking it to the finish line.
It's going to be way faster to write a book. Like
Yes.
I think if I really want to, I could write a book in like a month. Whereas before I would think it would take me like a year or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you could really like just sit down and just get it out.
Tom, did you sit down and write all those books that you talked about before?
Yeah.
That must have been years of your life, no?
It was. That's why I don't do the writing so much anymore. I do the marketing and the sales and the publishing, because for that very reason, it takes a lot out of you. But this ChatGPT does introduce an interesting aspect to the equation, which is how quickly can you get out that first draft? Because I'm a slow writer. I always have been. Writing the blogs took me forever, the blogs that I wrote. But the thing is with ChatGPT, like at least right now, the quality is very low. Like it's not great. It's better than the average writer, but it's not very attractive. It doesn't have any personality.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's good for a first draft. Now, you also mentioned the legal piece of, or two other things you mentioned, like, are people doing this now? Yeah, they are. There's a flood of AI written books already on Amazon. So like, that's an interesting part of the equation here for writers and self-publishers. Now you're not just competing against shovelware that people are outsourcing to the lowest common denominator, you know, the people that kind of like really game and rank the system and stuff like that. You're now competing against, I have no idea the numbers, but allegedly, I'm reading some articles about this recently, hundreds to thousands of tons of AI written content. And then that brings up the legal component where I don't think anybody's attributing anything to that. And I have no idea. I think that's a big gray, just unknown space right now. Like, how do you document that? Can you use it? That's the great thing about the internet. People are just going forward with it. So we'll see what happens.
It's like the early stages of like Google. I feel like we're in the golden era
Yes.
of AI right now. Like I was talking to a friend about this. It's like, I don't think this is going to last forever.
No.
Right. I think it's got like duplicate content used to be a thing. People just steal content from one blog, put on another one, get more backlinks. And then, you know, eventually Google caught on to it. And now duplicate content is not a good thing. Right.
And how easy would it be for them to watermark effectively the AI generated content?
What I'm thinking, they have these classifiers. There's a few different ones, right? What I imagine is that in the future, ChatGPT will know what content it gave.
Yeah.
And we'll keep a record of that because it doesn't know right now. Like when you use a classifier, I could take something it gave me with enough prompts, right? Like I customize it with prompts, put it into the classifier, and it doesn't say it is for sure written by level down is like maybe it might be, right? That sort of thing. But I take stuff that is not written by AI and it's still sometimes maybe it might be. So I think the maybe it might be written by AI is okay. Right. But once like Google Bard comes out and they're going to have their own sort of classifier, like I would hesitate to use Google's Bard because they are probably going to track what information they're giving. And so it's going to be less likely that I would want to use it like on my blog or publish it and so on, because they're probably more likely going to know it came from them. So I probably would stick with something like a ChatGPT.
Or I'm hearing that you can do custom servers and start to build your own AI, which I'm most fascinated by.
My next question for you was, is being a bestseller what it used to represent? Because I'm spacing right now. I swear it was Onyx and Gall or somebody on social media. Like recently, it was like, why is everyone a bestseller? Like if everyone is getting bestseller status so easily, then doesn't it kind of lose its flair?
Well, that's different, Andrew, from like New York Times bestseller or like
Amazon versus Amazon.
yeah, I think the Amazon thing, because you can like easily game the Amazon thing. And Tom, I'm actually curious. I've heard about some of the components of it, but I'm curious to know where it's at right now and how you become I don't know if you just say Amazon bestselling author versus you get on a list, and what are the main lists?
Well, we can break it down. I mean, New York, that's the one that isn't based off Boker Bookscan and some of the other.
What's Boker Bookscan, you said? What is that?
I believe it's still that one. It may have a different name, or there may be other entities. They basically track book sales. So they'll track physical print book sales at bookstores when that used to be a thing. Still is a little bit, but they'll track the sales of books. And now I think probably a lot of it from Amazon. So that one ties directly into USA Today and Wall Street Journal. So like if you can just move a certain volume of books, you can hit USA Today and Wall Street Journal.
When Gary Vee was launching Crush It, which was his first book, he had this thing where like buy 500 books and I'll go on your podcast, buy 10,000 books and I'll speak at your event. And that's how he was selling like tons of Crush It, right?
Yeah.
So are you saying that that sort of stuff does not work with New York Times, but it will work with like USA Today?
100%.
Yeah, Tony Robbins, Dean Graziosi, they all partake in those kind of strategies. Yep, for sure.
Yeah, well, the New York Times is interesting because I think they have a hidden thing, like they keep it enclosed. Because like I've definitely been involved in book projects that should have been on the New York Times and weren't, but they were on USA Today or Wall Street Journal, for instance, right? And just on volume of book sale.
What are like all the book lists that you want to hit? I heard there's like only like 3 to 5. Yeah, New York Times, USA Today. What else?
That was it. Yeah, those are the main ones. New York Times is still, allegedly the number one.
Wait a minute. You kind of breezed past that, Tom. I want to know more about that.
Sure.
You said that you were involved in some book launches that should have been included in the New York Times, but weren't. Like, I don't know anything about the New York Times bestseller list. Are you saying that you got to be part of a club?
Yeah.
You got to know the right person. You got to grease the right people. Like, you got to pay a certain fee or something. Like, what's required for you to be on that list?
I think that is part of it. Here's the thing, because I know, so let me speak to what I know for sure, because New York Times is kind of this like, it's this hidden thing because they don't exclusively just base it on book sale volume. And I'll get into the bulk sales in a second. Bulk sales won't help you either necessarily. It has to be done in a particular way. Okay, let me break it down. So first, when it comes to USA Today, Wall Street Journal, I believe this is still the case that they will count things on, again, through these agencies that track book sales and pull it from, say, Amazon and things like that. And then they just look at cumulative figures and it's like you're either on it or you're not. And you're on it on a given week or whatever, like week to week, right? So you can ebb and flow and it can change. And so coming to volume book sales, one of the things that when we were engineering these kind of launches was we could not do bulk sales because then an author could just take his own money or her own money and just buy 30,000 copies of the book. That was about the range. If you could do about like 20 to 30,000 copies within like a month to 2 months. And ideally you want to stage it so you have like 10, 15,000, well, say 15, 20,000 the first week, 20 to 30,000 the second week, 30 to 40,000 the next week, or some kind of scale like that. Not necessarily at that volume. You want to be doing at least like 10,000 a week though. And then you can usually hit one of these lists and you want to build it up. That's how you're most likely to get on those lists. But when you do bulk sales, if it's just one bulk sale, they have means of tracking this stuff and you don't get it counted. So there's literally companies out there where they take bulk sums of money and they'll go engineer purchases of these books as individual purchases versus bulk orders. Does that make sense? So now,
can these lists they'll find out that's what they're doing, or it's like you cannot figure out that's what happened?
Well, I think if it's done right, you don't know. And it's one of those things that these companies that are out there, they're very shadowy. Like you kind of, if you dig deep, you can find some articles on them, but they're not very.
Yeah, I've heard about them.
So it seems to be one of those things that's like, it's not illegal, but it's just not, it's not in the limelight. It's kind of the background.
Gray hat.
Gray hat, yes.
Yeah, I want to know something because I'm very curious. It's kind of what I want to get out of this episode today. Let's just say I'm going to launch a book. I want to be a bestseller, Amazon bestseller. What is the strategy?
If you have a list, email list, number one, low hanging fruit. Number two, if you have social media, put it on that, but the conversion rates are way lower. It's not as significant. So the obvious things, I guess, we'll just assume that are in place.
But there are some things like set up in Amazon, right? Like I heard about this thing where like you want to choose a category that's maybe not so popular. I know there's some way to determine how many books are going to be launching in that period of time. And like you only need to be number one in that week. And some categories, a book will only sell like 50 books in that week. So all you have to do is sell 51 books and you're number one, right? So explain that to me. Is that still a thing? How does it work? How do you pick the category? What tools do you use to figure that stuff out?
There may be a tool. I actually do a lot of stuff manually, but I believe there are tools out there for doing it. But literally, if you don't have the tool, you go to Amazon. I always try to keep it in the relative space or niche that I'm in, because I have seen people like number one in teddy bears or something. And you're like, okay, this person person's just gaming it. It's like, what value is there for you in that? But if it's more like a marketing book, but then you realize, oh, there's like 100 subcategories to be in marketing, and you realize, oh, I can just be in general marketing, or I could be a little smart and go to one of these categories that's less competitive. And you find that out by going to that. You just click through, go to that category, look at the number one book in that category, click on it, see what its sales rank is. And if the number one book in a specific subcategory, you look at its rank in all of Amazon, if it's like over 50,000, I'm like, I can be a bestseller in that category. Easy. It only takes like 50 book sales. That's it. There's a relative like number kind of game to it. So I always look for those ones that are like over 50,000. I'm like, that's easy win. The second thing is there's certain hidden categories that you have to request Amazon to put you in. So once you put it on Amazon, then you put a request in and say, I want to be in this category. They'll put you in it. You can't select it. So you just have to be aware of that. So just dig through those. Yeah, that's the big thing on categories. And again, then you're like, well, what's the significance of this? Well, if you're in a bestseller in an appropriate category, like it's not totally random, there's value in that, because then you are genuinely a bestseller in that category, at least subcategory, right? And then there's potentially a benefit if you can generate the traffic and you can generate the sales and get it into the bestseller status, that the algorithm can maybe pick that up. But here's another hack. If you can get an ambassador group, which was one of the things I was going to say you should do, Matt, an ambassador group, or get a group of people who are like raising their hands, like 50 to 100 people who say, yeah, I will read the book and review it and buy it day one. Or if it's free, do that. That's fine. You just want a verified review. So you want to organize for that, but get a core group of them. Don't give them the link to the book. Tell them to go to Amazon and search the book title and find it. And so now Amazon sees that and they actually will start to rank you higher. So not everybody's going to go through the pain of that, but that is actually has a significant impact, because now they're searching the title.
How many ambassadors do you think you need for that?
50 to 100. Yeah. To get something off to a good, that's it. I mean, if they're legit, but I mean, straight up, I'll try to get like, I've had 300, 500 before. If I can have more, I will. I just know that once it gets to that bigger amount, like, you just have drop off, like how many people are really going to do it. So it just depends. And it depends if I'm doing it free book giveaway, or if I'm doing like, if I'm launching it for free, or if I'm launching it paid. And my typical strategy is that ambassador group. What I'll usually do is, that's why I keep it smaller, but I get them to commit to downloading the book and leaving a review and sharing it.
You're talking about Kindle though. What about physical?
Doesn't matter. That's organized for Kindle. It'll affect the paperback as well. You still be a bestseller in the charts. So just organize for Kindle. Still have the paperback, but organize for Kindle, because then you can give it away for free. And I usually do like a 3-day giveaway for free.
If you give it away for free, you could still be a bestseller?
Yeah, but here's the catch. You will be a bestseller in the free charts, because there's a free chart, and not in the paid chart. But if I get, say, 100 people to download that, they have to actually go through the book, because Amazon's now getting smart about this stuff. Have them like go through at least like 30, 50% of it, and then write a review. And that's a verified review. Then you go from 0 to 99 cents, and then you roll it out to your bigger list or another subset of your list, right? You see what I'm saying? And then the thing is, what happens is you should be an accrual of traffic. Before, you could really game this free to paid, like it was totally gameable. Now, not so much anymore, but there's still tertiary benefits to going free to paid. And so then you should very quickly become a bestseller, even giving it away for free. But again, you're strategic. It's like a private launch. You're not telling anyone, you're just publishing it. These are the days it's free, and you're telling your ambassador group.
Yeah, I've seen people do this before. So why go free? And then, like, why not just go to like the 99-cent Kindle book then? Like for me, when someone's like, can you go buy my book? It's $1. Like, I'll just go do it. It's just $1. I don't care.
Can we make this practical? Because I'm really curious about Tom's actual people you've worked with. Like, what are the topics that they're covering, and what are the strategies like Matt's referring to that they're actually rolling out with your help? One or two, it doesn't have to be. I know you've worked with hundreds of people now.
It's a little bit of a blur with what book I did what for.
Maybe just give us a couple examples of types of books and then a general strategy.
One of the authors we published was a weight loss book. It was F being fat.
I got to use that for email. F email. That's all I need, right?
Yeah, man, it did really well. Again, great audience, great book, actually very slim book, like very small. It was very just specific on weight loss content. And again, we just rolled it out at a discounted rate for his audience just to generate. I look at this like there's phases to a launch. That's how just my brain operates. So I'm like, if I have an ambassador group and I can say get 50 to 100 people, like I've done both recently. The reason I would do free is because I have an ambassador group and they're committing to downloading it, writing a verified review, and sharing the book. And I won't have them share it when it's free. I'll have them share it and I usually go free to 99 cents. I just did one on email marketing, actually, come to think of it, Yara, funny enough. And it was specifically on that subject. And so we did free. We got the downloads. We got the reviews, the verified reviews. We then went to 99 cents and then rolled it out to his list, early notification list, who signed up like, yes, I want to be notified. So we're kind of building these like lists or subsets of lists, and then rolling the book out kind of like that. And then we do it to a broader audience. And then we leverage that into, after the 99 cents, what I'll do is I'll overlay that with those discount book sites. There's a bunch of like discount book sites. So I'll leverage that and I'll do like over the course of like 14 days, keeping the book at 99 cents for like, 7 to 14 days, maybe less. But every day I'm hitting like 2 or 3 discount book sites to promote. So now all of a sudden I'm getting that traffic. I'm getting the referral traffic from my ambassadors now who are sharing it. We've got the verified reviews in there. Now all of a sudden it's a bestseller because it really can't not be a bestseller if you're picking the right categories. And then I'm rolling it out to partnerships and getting other people to refer it when I bump it up to maybe like $2.99 or $3.99 or $4.99 for an ebook. And again, I'm always focused on the ebook because it's the cheapest one to make available, but I always have the paperback available as well.
It sounds like this only works if you actually have some kind of audience or relationships with people who can get you in front of audiences. What if you don't? What if you're nobody? This is the first book you've written and you're trying to get some sales.
Could you write in your book, could you highlight some people that would be good promotional partners for you? Could you write about them?
Okay, so I write about Andrew if I want to get him to promote my book. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Maybe that's one way to do it. The other thing is, you got to think, it's like, okay, so how do I get this? So that is straight up a very powerful strategy, because then you could be like, hey, Andrew, really love your work. I mentioned you on page 37. Here's a copy of the book. Would love it if you'd be interested in sharing it or something like that.
Would you share it, Andrew, if I gave you page 37?
I'd consider it. Yeah.
It would have to be page 19.
Page 19.
It's worth a negotiation.
Got to be less than the first 20 pages. Yeah. What is the data they say about that? Like a crazy low amount of people read the first 10 pages or something. And I get the sense that all 4 of us, we're all readers. And full disclosure, I actually prefer Audible. I prefer audiobooks over, it ties into my lifestyle though. I'm a digital nomad. These are interesting points. I'm loving this chat because I only have one book, and I got to get my butt in gear and write another book.
Or I just want to answer that question. If you don't know anyone, but you're in a space, it's almost begs the question, like, why don't you know anyone? And then the question is, if it's good, but okay, let's say you're just like, you're really introverted and you just don't know anyone. If it's good content, then we just got to get in front of the right people. We got to reach out to the right people. So this takes homework. You got to know who you're reaching out to. But if that's email marketing, I call it like the slide-in technique. So if I have something I want to be competitive, I want to be collaborative. Like if I have a book on how to create courses, that's not a fit. That's conflict. But if it was something like specifically in or around that space, that's why actually when you go narrow, it helps a lot too, because you're less competitive with somebody. Like it could be something like that's tertiary, like related to courses, how to use your course to get more speaking gigs, or how to amplify, or how to something beyond the course or before the course, right? I look for audiences like that. So I look, where can I slide in with this? So any book you can do this with. It's just about how do you position it? How do you narrow it? Not even adjusting for the book. Like the book could even be kind of comprehensive, but I always look for places where I'm not going to be competitive. Like maybe somebody has something about growing your list, like focused on list building. And then I have a book on courses. Hey, here's one way you can monetize your list. And this is where the book, and this is I kind of touch on this. Would this be a good fit for your audience? Because there are so many content creators out there now who are looking for content. And I know you guys are in a position where you probably get solicited this kind of stuff a lot, but there's plenty of people who aren't in that position that don't get solicited as much. If you just take a little bit of a personal approach, can usually get a good response and people enthusiastically being willing to check out a book, especially if it's like you can send a free copy or do something like that. So 100%, especially if you're willing to give free copies away to their audience, it's like, it's a good fit because the author is positioned as a good fit for that person's specific audience. They're going to give away some of the books. Oh, and this person's going to help write that piece of content for me. It's like, if you're a content creator, that might be the perfect slide in.
If I just create a thing on my website, on WebFriendly, and I'm like, you could buy these books, and then there'll be a bestsellers list on there. It's like, it's kind of a little bit of a Whereas like I could just make my own list and be like, this is a best-selling book. And I wonder about that with the Amazon thing. Like, I guess the average consumer doesn't really know. They don't get that. So I just wonder if like, what else could you do to gain credibility out of your book? You say a certain amount sold, or do you do, try to win an award for it, or like, try to get on one of these other lists, like as you said, like USA Today or something like that. What else do you do to like get credibility out of the book?
Yeah. I think it comes down to kind of what you're willing to spend and invest in it. The other thing is like AMS ads. So you could just run ads to it.
But do you think like a really good book is like a really good YouTube video? Whereas like if it's actually really good, it is going to sell. Same like when you do YouTube, right? If you're making good videos, they're going to get views. Do you think it's the same thing with a book? Like once you start getting it out a little bit and then people start talking about it, or do you have to just keep on like, where's the tipping point?
I've seen lots of good books that I think don't go anywhere. So it's hard for me to tell on that. I think that that's the thing. Like just being good isn't enough. That's kind of the prerequisite to enter the market, is it has to be good and to actually get seen and bought and shared. And you kind of have to engineer some of that stuff. You have to be smart about it, because people do what they're told, go pick up the audiobook. You'll learn better if you listen to the audiobook while you're reading. It's like, that's very effective. There's some parts of this you are responsible for, and you kind of have to feed the algorithm to make sure that you stay at the top, if that makes sense.
Just real quick for the listeners here, this is what I think the overview of kind of what I got out of this is going to be. If I want to write a book, I'm going to pick a concept for the book. I'm going to like a mental model or something that I want to kind of, make it about one thing, basically, right? Then when I tell the stories to add fluff to the book, I'm going to tell stories about influencers who then I will later on reach out to and say, I talked about you in this book. And I want to probably get, I'm guessing, between 25 to 50 influencer types that maybe have over 100,000 followers to potentially get them to talk or share about the book on their social media, maybe, I don't know. And then I'm going to have to get about at least 100 ambassadors who will then buy and review my book. All I got to do is just buy the Kindle version. They don't even have to buy the paperback version. I didn't know that. I could do the free thing to the paid thing. You're saying that's a technique. We never talked about this, but I think I would want to get on a podcast tour or like a YouTube tour thing and probably get on, 20 plus, maybe 30 plus podcasts to be able to talk about the various topics and concepts. And to go further, I think I would also probably take some of these stories inside the book and maybe make like YouTube videos. I would say like maybe like animated or with like, like kind of like documentary style looking videos that kind of share some of the concepts. That's my own idea of what I might do with that. But also I think before writing a book, it would be a good idea to try to build your audience either through blogging or a newsletter, posting on social, and seeing the traction that you get with the concept. Because I think if you have this one thing concept and you start creating content around it, get it out there, and then see how people respond to it. And if they're like, oh, that was very useful to me, I really like that. There's a lot of these little concepts that I've heard. There's one that, was called like Pomo. It's like a timer thing.
Pomodoro technique.
Yeah, it's like, I don't think it's actually helpful, but I just thought that was interesting. That it was just like, this is one concept of like you work for, I don't know what it is, an hour or something like that. You take a 20-minute break. Do you guys know what it is?
I can't remember it, but I like your point, Matt. You're sort of saying anchor your book to a technique that can gain traction in sort of your society or group or industry, like the 4-hour work week, 80-20 rule. I know James Clear has his habits one. You can get the press to start talking about it. You get people talking about it on podcasts like we're doing now. And that's huge. Like it's almost like you become part of culture, which I think is pretty impressive.
You know who did a good job of this was Eric Ries before he wrote The Lean Startup, because he was talking about, he's like, I analyzed Dropbox and Facebook and all these various tech companies, and this is the process that they use. And he coined all their processes. They didn't know that's what they were all doing, but he found these similarities, created a formula and a framework for it, which I would say revolutionized tech structure and how to grow a business, right? Then he launched the book, but he had a huge audience before launching that book. And I would say the book is actually the most boring way to learn the Lean Startup because there was so much content out there about it. And now it became like a movement.
Like Jeff Walker's product launch formula in the internet marketing space, a similar sort of thing.
Yeah. Because this is one concept. It's just like, how to do a product launch formula. And same like Hormozy. I think he's doing a series, right? So he's like, the first one was the offers. Then it was, he said what it was. He's got 2 more coming out. It's offers.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, but you're right. Yeah.
He says that whatever there, right? And so the whole concept is, when I was reading Hormozy's book or listening to it, like I had heard all that stuff before in various places. It's all over the place. And I feel like he just studied it so much and just put it all into one place. And like now that is the best book to go learn all about how to create a great offer, right? But it was like concepts from all over the place, which I really love.
$100 million offers?
Yeah, that's what it's called. His $100 million offers is going to have $100 million sales. Is that what it was?
I didn't think he had his second book out yet.
No. He said that it's a trilogy, but it's interesting too that like that book is, he always promotes it as like, hey, it's just $1 on Amazon or whatever, right? It makes it simple, right? I have a question for you, Tom. Do you think that like, let's say I want to write a book, maybe just because I've never wrote a book, so it's like my first book, I would feel like that book would like kind of like define my body of work. Of course, I'm talking nonfiction, right? So if I were to write a book, how do I decide? Before, I remember I used to do this program called Social Media Director. So someone told me like, hey, you should just write the book called Social Media Director and like define that niche or whatever, right? Yeah, I could, but then at the time I was kind of like thinking about getting out of it, and and I was really into funnels, stuff like that. And I was like, I don't want to like do the social media director thing and then like people still perceive me as a social media person. So it's like, how do you decide? And should you go broad? Should you go niche? I've always thought about that because now with ChatGPT, I'm thinking like I could write a book. And I remember like I met people that I'm like, oh, cool, you have a book. Right away, I think they're more of an expert at whatever it is that they do. And I really want to get into this because I want to talk about the marketing behind a book. Where so far we're just talking about, publishing the book and so on. But I think there's so many benefits towards writing a book that I really want to get into. First, I want to know is like, how do you choose in the way like title, the topic, the niche of the book? And I'm talking for business professionals. I assume that's kind of mostly who you're working with and who this is sort of targeted towards, right?
Yeah. I mean, straight up, yes. I'd say that's exactly it. And you mentioned like, oh, I didn't want to like pigeonhole myself. I don't know if you use those words, but at the same time, that strategic strategically is probably the play. You know, it doesn't sound good, or maybe it doesn't sound as good as like if you could write something that is more clever or creative, but it's actually like the more direct, simple things are usually more effective. It's like I worked with Ash Murray, who wrote Scaling Lean. So again, like if you're talking lean marketing, he's one of the guys. We'll say he's the top 2 or 3 guys in it, you know?
You know what I love is books that are about one thing.
Yes.
Like I just thought about the book called The One Thing, which is all about this one concept. Like what other like books?
The Checklist Manifesto, like all those books that are like, could probably be like a 10-page PDF, but are still very good. I'm not knocking it, but it's like that stuff is really powerful.
I hate books that were like, I was reading one, it was called Positive Intelligence. And I want to talk to you more about that book because the marketing of that book was very interesting. But I was listening to the audio of that. It was so annoying to me because I was like, the whole book, I know you could explain it to me in like 10 minutes, 20 minutes. It was just so much stories and examples. I'm like, I got it, just like, you know, and because it was just dragging on, I couldn't remember what the hell this chapter was about, you know? And that really annoys me. But like, yeah, I think some of the best books are about one concept, but they go really deep into it. Like one of my favorite books that I feel like I really remembered a lot was Influence by Robert Cialdini.
Yes. That's one of my favorites too.
And then I remember like I read The Art of Not Giving a Beep, right? I love that book. After I read that book, I was like, I gotta recommend this to all my friends. Like I really, really enjoyed it. I cannot remember one thing from that book. I remember he goes through like the principles that he follows in his life. I think he had 7 principles. I think it was 7, right? I cannot remember anything. And I remember it was like a week or 2 later. I was like, I cannot remember a single lesson out of this book. And I don't know why. Like it was kind of strange. So I just can't remember anything. But with Influence, I like that stuff was so practical in my life. It just like changed a lot of things. That's what I think about. How do you know when you're ready? There's a lot of like, you know, call them like mental models or learning modalities that you maybe like figure out or create. And you write the book around that one thing. That's how I think a great book can be written. But what are your thoughts there on like, how do people figure that out? Or like, should they wait until they have that before writing the book?
Yeah. I mean, if you have a business, I think, and it's, you know, and yeah, with ChatGPT, it's like, side note, if there's a way to engineer it where you could just put all your old content in, that's what I'd love. Because I've written so many blog posts. I've done so much training. I have so many videos, so much content and courses. I'd love to just give it to an AI and be like, hey, just rough draft this for me. So that I'm very keen.
That's what I'm saying is that I don't think like broad books do well. I think it's like you coin a concept and you're
Right.
like, here's the thing. This is what I want to put into the world.
Some of the more successful books I'd say that I've worked with in the last couple of years were what we call not low content. That's probably got a different definition. That's more like journal type stuff and things like that. But like there's a classification on Amazon. It's like when you're under a certain number of pages, around the like 50 to 100. And those nonfiction books work really well because there's no fluff in them, basically, is what you're getting at. That's why you don't remember any of it. Because you're like, oh, that was just all fluff, is another way to describe it. It's very forgettable. Stories are useful. People learn through stories. But like you can see I picked that up on that pattern very quickly when I got into writing and publishing, was how much books, certain types of nonfiction books, follow a certain formula and are just padded with stories just to beef them up and beef up word count. When you only need probably like 1 or 2 stories to demonstrate a truth of a thing. And that's why Cialdini's book, you remember, because you remember the dude given, and I don't even remember the specifics, but it was like, what was the real estate guy given the water or the Coke? Right. And then that leading to a massive transaction, increase of conversion rate of a bigger transaction. And the lesson you learn from that is if you just give a little thing, you can substantially increase the conversion rate on something else. And it's not 1 for 1. It's not like, you know, so there's little stories like that you can remember because they're really practical. Coming back to it, yes, I would say be very specific and then do it as quickly as possible. Get the version out as quickly as possible. Don't hang on to it because there's utility in very short, precise books.
Speaking to that, Matt, I want to jump in here because I think I got a perfect example here of someone who solved what you're actually asking right now. You and I both know Cameron Herold. He recently published his 6th book called The Second in Command. And he's got The Second in Command, Double Double, Meetings Suck, Miracle Morning for Entrepreneurs, Vivid Vision, which is his most successful, most popular book for sure. And I'm missing one. But the point is,
you know, like with Vivid Vision was around the one concept of how to create a vivid vision. That's what I'm saying is that those are the most successful ones.
But the point that I'm trying to make here is each of his books had a main focus, main topic, and he intentionally launched each book knowing that all of them contribute to his overarching theme, right? Yeah. So that you don't need to worry about being branded for a certain thing. You can launch multiple books all about things that you're an expert in, all about things that you're passionate about, that all contribute to the overarching thesis that is you, the overarching expert. And actually, I specifically heard Cameron say, if you're an expert, if you're a thought leader, if you're a leader in anything and you don't have a book, you're missing out. So that speaks hugely to Tom, what you're doing in helping experts with trying to achieve their their goals. And I published a book on being a digital nomad, but I don't have a book on YouTube marketing. And that's definitely a failing on my part. I need to get my ass in gear. Speaking of, Tom, do you walk people through the process of writing a book? Or do you say, no, you go write your book and then come back to me and I'll help you market it? Can you break that down for us?
I don't do the writing so much, mostly just the publishing. I mean, with the publishing company I have, we have editors, that will come in and edit books and do that thing. I more look at it from a marketing standpoint. I'm like, can I market this? Like, who would buy this book? Do I have access to those audiences? So I think of it from that mindset. So if I'm going to publish somebody, I'm like, the juice has to be worth the squeeze. There's plenty of books that don't sell. They have like the best intentions and there's just no way to sell them. So I try to be strategic about the authors that we work with through in search and publishing. And then from a education standpoint, if I'm just teaching, we do focus mostly on the packaging, marketing, distribution piece and book sales, like royalties, that kind of thing. And then on the business front, I guess if I'm working with nonfiction authors and things like that, my work has also led me to do a lot of funnel-based stuff. Like I've done a lot of launches. I probably should have a book on product launches or book launches, But yeah, we do focus mostly on the how do you get books in the hands of readers.
Can I bring this back to the listener? Because I'm sitting here going, getting on bestseller lists is nice, but it's more like a byproduct of actually succeeding at something with a book. And I know 4 things that people think about with books: fiction, nonfiction. If you're a fiction author, you're thinking, well, how do I become J.K. Rowling, right? There's that sort of big explosion. You make millions of dollars directly from your book sales as a fiction author. Then there's the people who are realistic and know, well, chances are I'm not going to be J.K. Rowling's. But like Joanna Penn, she was one of my past students. She helped people with books as well. She commented about how you can create a series of fiction books. And kind of like what you were talking about earlier with your early books, Tom, the cumulative effect of selling many copies of many books can be a full-time living as a fiction author. You're not super famous, but you got a solid following. Then there's maybe the fiction authors who are a little more realistic and not expecting that kind of result, but they know if they get like 1, 2, 3, 4 fiction books in a series, or maybe independently, the cumulative revenue from 3, 4, 5, 6 books could be enough for them to survive on. Maybe they'll sell some merch, build some kind of membership or something like that. But they're really focusing on making enough money to survive. And then back onto the nonfiction side, which honestly, I think all 4 of us probably have thought about way more than fiction. We see it as, well, we could become James Clear and write an Atomic Habits that just happens to go huge. And then, yeah, we'll make millions of dollars off that one book, but we'll also know that's like hitting a moonshot. So realistically, it's more likely going to be, as Andrew said earlier, a lead generation tool for our agency, or as you talked about, Tom, a lead generation tool for a funnel to sell a membership site or a course or coaching workshops and all of that. So of those kind of maybe 4 different archetypes there, what do you today recommend to your people you take through to focus on, or is it up to them?
I'd say for fiction, it's probably, I think, the second archetype where you got to be writing. There's 2 hustles. It's either you got to write a lot or you got to market a lot. It's really one of those 2 things. And for fiction, most fiction authors are going to be best off with a strategy of write as many books as possible and write series. It's the basic strategy, because it's kind of the only way a fiction author can create increase a lifetime value of a customer in a way of thinking, right? Is by having extra books in the series. One of the ways we work with fiction authors, though, is to say, hey, that you can make money beyond just the series, just the books themselves, in small little ways that can have an incremental and then a compounding effect too. But yeah, the baseline is you got to write. The person, that archetype number 1, the person who's like, I just want to write one book. That's not a strategy. That's never going to happen. Maybe you get lucky. That kind of almost ties into the moonshot idea, the last one too. So I almost kind of lump them together. Anybody who thinks one book is going to be it, I mean, probably not. I hate to break it to you, but I would say that nonfiction, same, like, banking on just one book being all of it. I'd rather write a book that I think is going to be more boring and more practical and specific. It'd be lead gen for me.
I feel like I would rather write like Atomic Habits and be like a notable author versus using a book for like a lead gen, that sort of thing. Did he just get lucky? Like, what's the difference between writing Atomic Habits or writing, like, I was thinking about like Russell Brunson and his whole Secrets trilogy, and that was very much geared towards selling ClickFunnels. But it was also, I'm sure he sold a lot of books, and they were really good books. I think they were really great books.
I think it's fair to say that Atomic Habits is way more famous than anything Russell Brunson has written.
Yeah, and I'm curious also like how much he made. I don't know anything. I never even read that book. I don't know a lot about it, but I am fully aware of the books. I hear so much about it. So how do you go about about creating that book versus a lead gen book?
Take a look at his platform and his audience and his reach just to begin with. And habits is a bigger market than funnels. So if you think about the penetration of the book into the market, like, Russell's done a great job. Like his stuff's everywhere. And if you're talking marketing and funnels, online type stuff, like he's done a good job, like saturating that market with his content, but it's only so big. When you get into habits and self-improvement, it's way bigger. Like when we do stuff in fitness and weight loss, it's way bigger. There's just certain niches that are just way bigger. So part of that is like, what space are you in? What niche are you in? Again, though, like in the keto space, we've done some like really big stuff, but that's also, I don't know, maybe that's a trend. I don't know how long that's going to last, but like you can kind of pick up on trends. You can capture like interest of certain topics. But at the same time, if you were to just like be like, oh, I'm going to go right on this because this is popular right now, or this has the biggest reach, again, if you don't have a business like
James Clear.
Yes, thank you. So he's been doing this for so long, right? I mean, that's his niche, that's his business. So he really did effectively, in my opinion, the way I look at that, I think it almost feels like he did right. He's doing the same thing I would suggest. Like he's writing something very specific for his audience that is great lead gen for him because he's in that world of self-improvement, right? And habit creation and formation like that. I believe he is. I don't read a tremendous amount of his stuff, but I believe it was for a while.
Does he have any other books or is it just Atomic Habits?
Yeah. He was on my podcast a long time ago, like 5-6 years ago. Very similar to Tim Ferriss's story, where he was getting some steam behind his blog posts, started getting guest articles on some bigger websites, starts getting invited to speak and appear on podcasts, and then he releases the book. Like Tim released 4-Hour Workweek, he releases Atomic Habits. And it just blows up. The book itself, I know I heard him talk, it's like royalties are in the millions of dollars a year. So he, living off just the book. What I do want to say though, compared to say Russell Brunson and ClickFunnels, it is interesting to think that Russell is probably way more wealthy as an owner of a tech company. The books aren't really anything more than lead generation tools to get more people into his software, which is a far bigger business than book sales ever would be. So strategy really matters, I think, here. And I'm wondering, do people actually come to you with the strategy or do you tell them the strategy?
Maybe a little both. I've worked with companies, a bunch of software companies. One of them did like HR or like software for brick and mortar businesses for employees, like clock in, clock out, time tracking, that kind of software. And specifically, we wanted the book to sell well and to get good reviews and to be featured in front of audiences that, guess what, might use their software. And so that was the strategic play there. They had an idea when they came to me, they're like, this is what we were thinking, but then they wanted me to kind of engineer it or put that, quote unquote funnel together, I guess you could say. That's the thing. I kind of have my hands in a bunch of stuff when I do these kind of launches because it's part funnel, it's part like email marketing and copy, it's part like lead gen, it's part sales and conversion. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I've worked with both.
For another resource for people, there is an interview with Tim Ferriss on his show interviewing James Clear. And both those guys are so into book publishing because it's a big part of their success. And they actually sound similar. Their voices are actually quite similar. So it's really fun to listen to that episode. And you get a lot of behind the scenes, like what does it take to release a book of that caliber and how did their life change? I think that was really interesting too. Like, going from having to look for opportunities to then saying no to most opportunities because it's overwhelming. And it was really interesting. It's a good podcast.
But both of them, I didn't work with James Clear and I didn't like necessarily like break down that launch, but like Tim's and a bunch of other books I've like tried to dissect even from the outside and then like use that like to influence how I market books and do stuff like that because they're very good at what they do. And I'm pretty sure the answer to both those, the reason they did so well is because of their networks, because of the influential people who recommended those books to their networks of readers. So it's like, I call it like the 100 little Oprah strategy. There's no longer like one Oprah with one massive audience and a giant gatekeeper that, none of us could ever actually get to. So it's kind of smoke and mirrors and illusions. But the idea was in the 90s, there used to be one influencer and it would reach everybody. But now there's like hundreds of Oprahs and they have smaller networks, but the cumulative reach of those networks is much more vast than it ever used to be. So if you can kind of strategically place your book in front of the right influential people to refer and share with their audiences, you can kind of engineer virality. Is kind of what I believe. And you mentioned a couple books. I don't know about J.K. Rowling, but I do know for a fact 50 Shades of Grey was engineered the same way. It was presented as if it was organic, but no, it was done this exact same way. It was by getting it in front of the right networks, getting the right people to refer it to the right networks, and having a process for doing it. I bet if James Clear ever talked about it or if you could ask him, I'd be real curious, honestly, because he has a huge audience to begin with, big, massive, loyal fan base, and he's been blogging for years. So I knew he had hundreds of thousands, maybe millions on his email list. So right there, you're going to get lots of sales. But I also know that he's got got a big network. Tim, all these people like that would read the book and then share it. And that's how you get these just massive results that can create kind of perennial bestsellers as well.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of the difference between writing a book that, you're really going to go for the book sales versus trying to have some back end offer on it. If you've already grown your audience, right? If you have a big audience, like even now, if like Mr. Beast writes a book, he'd probably become like a best selling author sort of thing because he's got that huge audience. Same thing how he's creating all these Compass chocolate and, all that kind of stuff, right? That's interesting. And then also the network thing. Yeah, because I've had a lot of authors that I know send me their book, early copies of their book, and basically ask me to post about it on a certain date, and hey, would you mind buying it? So they encourage their network to buy their book on a certain day, give it a review, and then like post it on social. Actually, Russell Brunson did it, right? I'm an affiliate for ClickFunnels. So I would get early copies of his book. And then the idea was they want me to post about it and share it with my network, and then obviously try to sell the book, right, through his funnels. That is interesting. So now let's go to, you don't have a big audience. You're writing a book and all the ways you could leverage a book. I know lots of ways. I'm just curious, what do you think are the top, let's top 3, top 5 ways to leverage a book when you don't have an existing audience?
To get book sales?
No, to make money from a book, whether it be from book sales or something on the back end. I was a public speaker for many years, right? And there were some conferences that actually the one I was thinking about was Social Media Marketing World. I wanted to like speak at the event, and they say they only allow authors to be speakers, right? I'm sure they've made exceptions and probably they were just rejecting me politely, but basically they're like, if you have a book, then they would consider me. And I've seen that more than once. So like getting speaking gigs, even like getting paid speaking gigs, corporate paid speaking gigs. I know that, speakers get paid tens of thousands of dollars, especially when they're an author. So I just give you that as one example of like how you could leverage a book to make money or to grow your business or your brand or whatever, if you don't have an existing audience. That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, well, speaking, let's put that up there. I mean, Dan Norris is another guy I work with. I don't know if you guys know Dan Norris. He used to do WP Curve and then sold it to GoDaddy. And I worked with him on his book. He's awesome. And now he's starting his like next company. He just like finished with his brewery company that he's been doing for like 5-8 years. And now he's starting a new one. But I worked with him when he did the 7-day startup about how he started WP Curve. And from that, it was basically within like 12 to 18 months, he had done well over 6 figures in sales. Probably about 30,000 came from paperback and ebooks. It was like 40 or 50,000 from translations, I believe, if I'm getting the numbers correct. It was over 100,000 from memberships. So like immediately, that's a pretty obvious one. He then rolled out his next book.
It was like he was selling a membership on the back end of the book.
Specific. It was like a private community. Yeah, it was like you pay, I don't know.
And he promoted that inside the book.
No. This was just afterwards. But that's the cool thing about self-publishing. You can adjust very quickly. So like you can tweak and you can edit the pages and add that in later if you want.
How did the book end up getting people to the membership?
He had a free Facebook group that he used. I believe that was in the first iteration of the book. So people were joining the 7-day startup group, Facebook group, totally free.
And then he started promoting his paid membership inside the Facebook group?
Yep. So that was kind of the funnel there.
Okay.
So yeah, memberships, consulting. Wouldn't say this to everybody to do it, but if you have a good book in a particular niche, like earmark like a certain amount of dollars that you spend on just sending that book to people, specific people who could be your clients. Like Andrew should write a book on YouTube and start sending it to people, right?
Yeah, really should. And building off of that and tying in what Matt just said about the speakers, from what my understanding, best practice is if there's going to be 800 attendees, you literally pay to have 800 of your own books shipped to the event so that they're on the chairs and every attendee gets a copy of your book. Yep. Like they're not buying your book. You're providing the book because they're attending the event, and then they end up reading your book or they end up gifting your book, and then you generate that much more credibility, authority, traction.
Yeah, one of the authors that we published, Dr. Jason Winkle, one of the first books actually I published through Insurgent Publishing was a high performance athlete. He still does. He speaks at like NCAA and like athletic events and stuff like that. He's in that realm. So again, like he'll get asked to speak. Yeah, we're shipping out books for these events. And so we support him in that mission and help like get the distribution going like that. Again, if you're in a niche where especially you can get consistent speaking gigs, then it's absolutely an amplifier. Like if I was a speaker, I think that would be crazy to be a speaker without a book for that very reason that Andrew just mentioned. It's just seeing it firsthand. It's very easy to write that into the negotiation. Like, and then all of a sudden just think about the virtuous cycle that is. Not only are you speaking, getting paid to speak, and you get these bulk book orders, all these people now have your book, and you just see how it kind of keeps going. So yeah, I love that strategy too.
They say the book is like the ultimate business card.
Yeah, but if it doesn't get in the hands of a reader, it's a very expensive, exhausting business card.
Well, I would think like if you do an event, 800 people, and you give them all a book, like the chances of them all, or like what percentage are actually going to read the book, and so I almost think it's better just kind of keep a big bulk of books at the back of the room. If you want one, go grab one. That way they're like intentionally. But I was thinking about while you were talking, I was like, when have I ever been at an event, given a book, and I actually read it? I was at the ClickFunnels event. He's a sales guy. It was a very small book, micro book for sure. And I ended up reading it on the airplane, but I remember absolutely nothing from it. But the other one I remember was first time I met Dan Lok, which was in like 2009, 2010. And he gave everyone a copy of his book, F You Money. And I actually read it and I thought it was so funny. And then I remembered him. And then like years later, he was at my event. And then like I remembered him because of the book. I was like, oh yeah, I read the book. It was a very funny book and you get a good idea of his personality, right? I was given the Salesforce book. I think it's called Behind the Cloud. I didn't finish it, but I started reading it. And then I think it was Dharmesh from HubSpot. He wrote the book Inbound.
Yes, I have that one.
I was given that book too, and that was a good book. So yeah, but there's many times I've been given books that I've just been like, not.
And lots of people buy books and don't read them as well.
Yeah, that's true too.
Kind of part of it. But I think that's, the interesting thing is, at least in Western culture, I don't know, maybe this is universal. It's kind of hard to throw a book away. It's very easy to throw a card away.
Yeah.
So there's something about it. Like I have books on my bookshelf. I haven't read all these. Hopefully I've read most of them, but like there's still some I'm like, I need to read this. It's still my to-do, but I haven't gotten rid of it. And there's even some where I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever read that. Like I was gifted it, but it's like kind of hard for me not to throw a book away. I don't know what that is.
Tom, do you have any recommendations or suggestions around the difference between people writing their own book or hiring a ghostwriter? I know some very successful people, very busy people, where they literally just pay a business to interview them. It's over 2 calls, 3 calls, 4 calls. Just interview me, ask a bunch of questions. I'll tell some stories. They go write the book. Maybe I'll, tweak it a little bit, like probably pros and cons for both strategies. What do you tell people?
You got to get a good ghostwriter. I've been down those rabbit holes before and kind of just tested it with some cheaper offerings, and you get what you pay for. Books like Book in a Box or now Scribe, I think they're not charging $25,000 anymore. I think they charge like $50,000 or $70,000 or something like that. Presumably you'd be getting a pretty talented writer. That's the thing. It just totally comes down to what's the quality of the writer. And I'll tell you what's an interesting business model. Kind of makes me wonder. Having that same business model and now letting ChatGPT do all the heavy lifting for you and just having editors come in. Because really that does streamline the whole process. But that also begs the question, why go to a ghostwriter now? So again, if you don't have a tremendous amount to spend, you just have to vet the clients. There's nothing wrong with using a ghostwriter. I mean, there's nothing like in that regard. It's more like what's the quality you're actually going to get? And are you a better writer than that person? And are they going to write in your voice? Like, I don't know. I tried to have something ghost written for me and I was like, this just doesn't sound like me. I can't do it. I just scrapped the whole project. But it was interesting to experiment with it.
There are so many people, specifically in America, I call them the middle Americas, a lot of women, even elderly women or whatever, that have wrote books. They love the idea of ghostwriting and interviewing and like kind of getting your knowledge out of your head and putting it in writing. So I've looked into it before because I know you can get someone to write your book for like 10, 15 grand and they love it. They're passionate about doing it. They really want to do it. So I've seen these companies that would like kind of ghostwrite for you and their prices and so on. But yeah, you could easily find someone who will do this for you.
I can't fill my bag with half books. So I'm an Audible user for sure. I've always been a big fan and huge proponent of the author actually reading out their own book. For some reason, it just cheapens it when it's someone else reading out their book, right? Books are heavy. Paper's heavy.
If you haven't heard Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography talking about authors reading out their own books, I think he reads the first chapter out and it's so fun to hear Arnie.
I've listened to that book. That's a 24-hour audiobook if you listen to it at 1x. And yeah, he only does, I think, the first chapter and the last chapter, much like Tony Robbins.
It's a great story too, because he's done 3 different things in his life: bodybuilding, politics, and movies. So I was interested to listen to fiction in audio. I want to tie this question of audio back to you, Tom. I feel like what Andrew and I do listening to audio is no longer niche. It's become mainstream and people listen to everything, anything on audio, not necessarily at 2 times speed, but a lot of people listen to fiction and nonfiction. How is the marketing game on the audio side? And is it just a case now where you're doing twice as much, or are you just recommending, hey, buy the book or buy the audio? Like, how does it fit into the strategy?
I think this is probably maybe niche or genre specific, maybe. So I don't know, but I have kind of read statistics that audiobooks can generate like 30 to 40% of sales for given books. So I don't know if that's across the board. I love audiobooks and I'm a big fan of having that, especially if I'm like a publisher. I wish all my books had audiobooks too. Bigger royalty. Again, lots of people who are already on Audible. So it's kind of built in. I'll give it the Alex Hormozy like strategy. I don't know if you guys got that, but I bought his ebook and then he recommended the paperback. I'm like, I'll buy the paperback. He recommends it as audiobook. I buy them all. I just bought all 3 versions of it because I'm like, why not? I'm sure I'll get some value out of this. It was just positioned very well. So I love that. And I think every author should just mimic that same thing. If it's a book that you want, encourage the person to get it on every platform. And maybe he's a unique case, like the way he presents.
How did he present the benefit of buying the audio? Because I listened to it on audio audio, and he's like, this is way better as the book. I didn't know he had a physical book for it though.
He does.
I thought it was only a Kindle book, but that's funny. So what was his pitch on why you need the audio when you have the physical?
It was something to the effect of, you're really going to understand these concepts a whole lot more if you're listening to me explain it to you while you're reading along. And then just to build off of what Tom said, I got the audio version. I didn't buy his physical book. I didn't buy his ebook, but I did do his companion online course that is absolutely for free on his website. It's not gated, but he's not stupid. He definitely pixels you. I'm sure he pixels you.
Yeah, it was not gated, which was interesting. And I talked to Tom about this, is that, and this comes back to the book I mentioned earlier, which was called Positive Intelligence. What I found out about that book is that it started off as this guy, I think he started like a TED talk, about talking about this positive intelligence thing. Then he wrote the book, he was selling the book. Then he made an app, and the app would then be a companion to the book. Then he started selling it. So he's just selling, basically the app was the course along with a sort of a community thing. You would get into these like pods. And then there was also, I think, some like daily things you could do inside the app or whatever, right? So now he's transitioned where he's just selling the course inside the app, right? And you get an audio and a ebook of the book, or you can just go buy the book as well. The book is on Amazon, I don't know, $20, but the course is like $1,000. And he's selling it corporate to like all their teams and employees or whatever. So that got me looking into this whole idea of having a companion app for your book. People are only now catching on to having a companion course. We saw Alex Hormozy do it. I heard Jeff Walker's doing it for his next book. Obviously, Russell Brunson did it.
I did it for pay what you want. It's actually the reason I still generate sales now.
I think having a course for your book is like 100%. You need to do that. I think even James Clear did it with Atomic Habits, I'm pretty sure. But I believe that everyone's going to have an app with their book. I talked to you about the company I was working with, Action Era, and they have like some unique features that are, catered towards authors. You can have this unique code inside your chapters or inside your book that could unlock additional content inside your app, unlock community discussions. And so there's some cool features you could do there. I could see in the future, every single book comes out, you're going to have expected to have an app. I did a lot of research to try to find authors that had a companion app for their book. And I only knew about the author of Positive Intelligence. And then there was another author, I forget her name right now, but she's actually more of like an artist, and her books were like more of like about creativity, and I think more like some of her artwork, stuff like that. And then she made an app. I think now she has more than one app that will change your wallpaper and send you positive motivational quotes, or change your wallpaper to have quotes, something like that. Charges a few bucks a month for it. I believe she made millions of dollars. Same with this guy with Positive Intelligence, millions of dollars from their app. Every author I could find that had an app that went along with their book had made a killing. I'm going to say millions of dollars from it, but it's not like, I don't see it a lot. And I remember like old school marketing tactic was like, I actually learned this from Joe Polish, was like, you put a sticker on the front of your book with a toll-free number. It says, call this number to hear an audio message from the author or something like that. Then you would have basically like an audio message that was a sales pitch. And I thought that was so genius. That was part of his piranha marketing.
That's old school. Wow. Taking me back there, Matt.
But I could see the sticker on the front with like, download the companion app, QR code, boom, you get the app. Now they register, they can access courses, audios, a community, like, you name it, you got it. Plus mobile learning is, will increase the amount of people who actually complete your course, because now you have push notifications and all that kind of stuff, which gets people to actually finish it. And we're always on the go. And I think courses are a great place to have on your phone. I don't know about you guys, but now if I'm trying to watch a course on the computer, I get distracted pretty easily. But the way I consume content when I'm like learning, it's been mostly YouTube. I got YouTube Premium, I'm listening to it. I lock my phone and I go for long walks, and that's how I've been consuming content. So I just think it's so important to go mobile with your course. And just seeing like what Hormozy did with his course, you're right, it's surprising he does not collect emails and stuff, but I think that's sort of part of his vibe, is like he's just building a big audience, and the content, his book is really great, right? I mean, it's just the foundation of all the stuff you need for a great offer.
And he's heavy on paid advertising, right? That's kind of his mode of.
Is he? I don't even know that.
I know he's heavy on YouTube organic. I have no idea what he's doing on the paid side.
Yeah, but like even you see like the courses that came with like Russell Brunson's books, I actually never watched them. I just know they're there. But if there was an app, the Russell Brunson app, where you could just access all the courses for all the books, and it's like that would be such a great thing to have. I would love to have that, and I would pay for that. I was actually just a little side note. I was looking at some data on mobile apps, and the amount that people are spending in apps has like, I forget what the percentage was, but like this last year, it was like the biggest jump ever. The amount that people are willing to spend now. You see a lot of the apps charging way more to access them. People are willing to pay monthly fees to access apps. The app market is growing exponentially, especially this last year. So I think there's a big market there.
I thought we could wrap it up with what's your favorite book? And I just happen to have my mind right here. This is a special version of my favorite book. It's like a proper, I don't know if people who know the never ending story, it'll be the Orin is there. And it's like, it's the actual book, but it's pretty legit. So that's my favorite children's book anyway, not my favorite fiction book and movie too. I'll throw it out there if you guys want to share yours as well as you wrap it up.
I will. I got this one here, which is The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman, which was the book that got me into building an online business. This is all about like how the internet came about. It was the first book that I read that like kind of like dived me into the path that I got into. In terms of like my favorite book, I don't know, but it was the one that really, I would say, influenced my life the most. Besides that, my favorite was probably Predictably Irrational by Jen Arley, was a really good one.
I should throw in a nonfiction before we keep going, because I don't want everyone to think I only read the never-ending story. Business books, I feel like when you're young, it's so different when you're reading a book when you're 20 versus when you're reading a book maybe now, or maybe when you're going through a phase in your life. Like I know, Andrew, you came a little later to internet marketing in your life, so some of these books might impact you a lot now. But for me, like, the 80-20 rule was a really huge book.
Why was that so good? Like, I feel like you just hear the title, I get it. I don't need to read the book.
I think that's also because Tim Ferriss kind of popularized it. And if you read that book, you get the origin story of like Vilfredo Pareto and how he saw the...
Yeah, no. The thing is, like, I know the whole Pareto principle and the P's and all that kind of stuff, right?
Well, you probably read that in like blog posts. If you the internet came after books, so it came from books first.
But I thought 80-20 came out later, like after
the internet. Yeah.
No, after like 4-Hour Workweek and all that. And I was wondering, like,
no, well, way before.
That's an old book.
I was reading Richard Koch in like late 90s, I think, and then Tim was like 2005. 2006. So that's some of the other ones, like 1 Minute Millionaire and Richest Man in Babylon and stuff like that.
Have you ever heard of The Slight Edge?
Yes, love that book. Great book.
So good. It's by an MLM guy, which normally I'd be really skeptical of that, but it's just awesome. And that was one of those books, I think maybe when I was younger, but I've actually gone back to it even now, and I'll peruse it and I'll see my old notes and stuff like that.
So what's The Slight Edge about?
Here's your 60-second summary, Matt, where you don't have to read the book. It's just that like everything you can do in life, like there's things you can do right now and there's things you cannot do. And things you can do are easy to do and things you cannot do are easy to do. And so everything compound. Was it Dan Hardy or Darren Hardy, Compound Effect? That's basically a rewrite of that book, I would say. The Slight Edge was like kind of the first one I read on that notion of it.
I'm not getting this. You're saying everything you could do is not hard?
No, there's like everything at any moment, any given moment, there's things you could do. It's easy to do it and it's easy not to do it. And so you either choose the path of like to do a thing or not to do a thing. And that slight edge is what compounds over time.
He has a fantastic graphic in that book too, basically proving that point. And I'm such a visual learner, but like Tom, you did a really great job explaining it just now. I couldn't have explained it that good, but basically everything compounds. Good stuff compounds, bad stuff compounds.
Yeah.
So choose your compounding. And there's a really great graph in the book. Not that this is important, but I actually bought the book, but the version I bought had a terrible formatting issue and none of the visual elements were visible. I literally had to go online and download like a free version in order to find a version that was readable, which is terrible for the people behind the book. I don't know why they did it that way, but anyways. And then I got to join the conversation here that Yarrow pitched for everybody. I have so many favorite books, but I'm just going to share two. Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. I listen to his audiobook every January. It really helps me start the year off on the right foot. I think I've listened to his book 5 times now.
Wow.
It's one of the best books in my opinion out there.
Yeah, I got like halfway through it and I was like,
Oh man, the last chapter is a total tearjerker too. Like you're missing out on some gold if you only got through the first half. Honestly, because it totally changed my life. Becoming Your Own Banker by R. Nelson Nash. 92 pages, 93 pages. Great book.
Do we have an Audible version of that one?
No, I don't think there is an Audible version of that one. I don't think so.
Can I get ChatGPT to read it to me?